And here we are, the Continental. Hey, look, I know you're thinking, am I gonna come out of here alive? It's a pretty valid question. Especially if you were the type who believed everything they read in Toronto's trashy tabloids. You know, those stories about a bar full of morally depraved women, like pickpocketing she-males and bar-brawling sapphos, these endless stories of only the most scandalous tidbits from the court papers. They wanted to scare people away from the house of drunken hell witches, but I tell you what, some of us found that just a little, well, alluring. Sure, it was causing a moral panic, but it also accidentally created a magnet, a beacon calling us toward the life. When this place opened, the area was called the Ward. It was a neighborhood of these ramshackle buildings. There were kosher butchers, Chinese laundries, and the Ward was home to Toronto's various waves of new immigrants, those fleeing slavery and anti-Semitism and poverty. They were tolerated as long as they lived where the city told them to and didn't ask for much. And Chinese men were just the latest newcomers to be placed there. No sense in letting them take up valuable real estate. And they're not Chinese families, Chinese men couldn't even bring their wives. They were brought to Canada for their labor, and they certainly weren't meant to stay. Let's just say they were given special treatment by being charged a special fee to enter Canada and then another to start a business. And of course, the tabloids were right there, stirring up the distrust and fear. There was limits on where they could work and live and who they could have relations with. They were harassed by the police and scapegoated for all manners of social ills, living on the margins of society, building community wherever they could. Sound familiar? Meanwhile, across town, it was getting harder and harder for a girl to get a drink and a date. The Rideau Hotel closed their ladies-only room, and some of us ladies were too mannish for the men. It was the beginning of the Great Continental Drift. The bar was obscured from the rest of the city. It was inhabited almost exclusively by Chinese men, ladies of the night, rounders, and all manner of down-and-out types. No good girl would be caught dead there. It was perfect. Inside, man, it was filthy. It smelled of stale beer and staler air. The floor was sticky from the spilled drinks and crunchy with broken glass. The furniture was old and half-broken, but it was our Shangri-La. Now, the front room was for men only, and the second room was the ladies and escorts room. Now, this is where all the men wanted to be, but they needed a woman's company to enter. Boy, those fellas paid many a butch's bar tab in exchange for gracing him with her presence and brokering a date with a lady of the night. And sometimes the butchers would be that lady of the night. It's where many of the Chinese bachelors would land. By the 1950s, the ratio of Chinese men to Chinese women was 10-1. The search for companionship was an eager one, and the lesbians were not averse to these propositions. Everyone was just hustling to survive in this town. And if you didn't get your name in the tabloids, well, you were looking good. Now the third room was ours, women only. See, women weren't really supposed to patronize beer parlors, and drinking in mixed company was looked down upon, so sometimes Toronto's puritanical ideals worked in our favor. The Continental was a bar of butches and femmes, working girls and tricks, Chinese bachelors and men passing through. We all made for strange but usually peaceable neighbors. And anyways, what other options did we have? Life at the Continental was about beer and socializing. There was no liquor, no dancing, no live entertainment, besides the occasional dust-up. Like when Wild Bill, this infamous butch, got into an argument, and in her rage, she drove her motorcycle right through the door and up to the bar. You see, the harder the butch, the better her rep. These were butches who wore fly front pants and DAs, drove taxis, made refrigerators over at Inglis. And at the Continental, where there were butches, oh, there were sure to be femmes. Femmes. Many femmes that worked at pink-collar jobs or practiced the world's oldest profession. They might look soft, but they were tough as nails. But don't get the wrong idea. You know, a breakup and a haircut was all it took for some to switch it up. Both were part of the downtowners set, the locals, the regulars, those living a life full-time. And then there were the uptowners, too. Women who passed during the week and only sought out other ladies on the weekends. They were the ones who got to keep their jobs and their houses and husbands. I wish everyone could have been as lucky as that. Now, the main advantage of the Continental, other than the 10-cent beer, was that unlike other bars, there were rarely police raids. The police were polite enough to wait outside and pick us up as we headed out to Hop Sam's restaurant. For a while, Police Chief Chisholm, he didn't pay us much mind. He left our little underground community alone. He told citizens of Toronto that automobiles were a bigger threat to children than perverts. But then in 1958, Chief Chisholm committed suicide. And then came Inspector Thurston. Good God, that man had a stone of hate to grind. He really had it out for us. He started enforcing these gross indecency laws, so now we could be picked up for loitering, kissing, or even looking mannish. I mean, it was all bad, and then it just got worse, because the drugs arrived. Opium, heroin, black beauties, lewds, you name it, it was there, and I'll tell you this, perverts on drugs caught a lot more trouble than perverts on beer. The cops were constantly picking people up, throwing us in jail or worse, taking us for a dreaded trip to Cherry Beach, where no one could see or hear what the cops did to you. And if you were arrested, it ended up in the papers, and those of us who still had family ties and mainstream jobs lost those as well. And the neighborhood was changing so fast, such a short time. Most of the bars and restaurants we knew were being leveled, and everything was being displaced, all in the name of progress, I suppose. Ever resourceful, the Chinese men started rebuilding further west, this time with their wives and children who were trickling in, thanks to new immigration laws. The men we'd known as friends, business partners, neighbors, even lovers, faded from our lives. To add to it all, there's this new movement emerging, the Women's Lib. We liked a lot what they had to say, but some of them, well, let's just say some of them didn't like the look of us. It was this whole new generation of lady-loving ladies, but we didn't really fit in well together. New bars opened up, but they weren't really our scene. We hung in there, but we weren't at the center anymore. The lights dimmed, then it was time to turn them out. We may not have to skulk around in the dark anymore, and hey, that's great. But I miss it. Even though it was a lawless and grimy hole in the wall, it was ours. It was the only place that outsiders like us could come together, and we fought like dogs to keep it that way. And fighting like that made the love that much sweeter. Boy, did it ever.